Paris has a massive problem right now, and it has to do with Airbnb. I'm French and I lived in Paris for around 10 years, and when Airbnb first came to my city, I thought it was the best idea ever, but lately I've experienced firsthand how it's making the city worse both for locals and visitors. And it's an issue that's way bigger than you can imagine, so let me tell you how Airbnb became a problem. As you know, there's a lot of people visiting Paris. In 2023, there was around 48 million people visiting, which means the around 2 million Paris residents are outnumbered 24-1. And you know, Paris has been one of the most popular destinations for years, and it's not gonna stop. According to the French newspaper Le Monde, 4 out of 5 visitors have been inspired to come to Paris after having seen a movie or a show. And just an example, this is what the accommodation looks like in the shows. So if you're part of these people, you're probably coming with high expectations, and as you'll see, the reality can be pretty different, especially for people staying in short-term rentals. And since all these people have to stay somewhere, Airbnb has truly taken over Paris. So back when Airbnb started in Paris, I found it really cool. I asked my landlady for permission to sublet my tiny apartment when I was away, and you know, the value proposition was simple for everyone. I made a bit of extra money, and the travelers had a cheaper place than a hotel with all the comforts of a home. And you know, I have to say that I tried my best to be a great host. I gave local tips like the ones you can find on this channel. I often left a bottle of wine in the fridge, and I had a cute little guest books where guests could leave little notes for me later. And it was a great time, and I even had people get engaged at my apartment, so things were pretty good. And I know what you're gonna ask me. No, you cannot stay at my place. I would never rent my apartment on Airbnb right now, and I'm gonna tell you why in this video. But anyway, I was not the only one who noticed you could make extra money renting through Airbnb, because shortly after I put my apartment on Airbnb, the Airbnb gold rush started. Now we have around 1 million listings in France, which is around a 60% increase from 2018. And France is the second largest Airbnb market in the world. And you know, things have changed a lot and are kind of more professional right now. Back in the day, the point was kind of staying at a stranger's home, but now things have become a bit more standardized. A lot of people use agencies to rent their places out on Airbnb, and an increasing number of people are Airbnb real estate investors and have several properties on Airbnb. And these Airbnb investors are responsible for over 30% of all Airbnb ads right now, versus around 20% in 2020, according to the city of Paris. In my opinion, this is part of the problem, but we're gonna come back to that because I have a whole section dedicated to bad short-term rentals and how to avoid them. But now there are almost 100,000 Airbnb rentals available in Paris, and there's kind of a little problem. Around a quarter of them don't have a license and are illegal. So what's going on, and why are there so many illegal Airbnbs in Paris? And for that, we need to backtrack a bit, and I need to tell you how renting an apartment works in Paris, and how Airbnb has kind of made things awful for us Parisians, while not exactly making things better for visitors either. You have to understand that renting short-term on Airbnb is way more interesting than renting long-term to, let's say, a student. And this is probably true as well where you live, but in Paris, things are on a whole other level. And by the way, when I'm saying Airbnbs in this video, I just mean short-term rentals in general. Airbnb has just become the symbol of this issue and just the general name we use for short-term rentals. Just like when we say Google this. Okay, so let me tell you how the rental market works in France. So on one side, you have long-term rental, which has specific laws that protects the tenant. Like for example, there's only very specific cases in which you can break a tenant's lease, which is not the case when you're doing short-term rental because it's flexible and it protects the landlord. But most importantly, there's more money to be made with short-term rental. And that's because all Paris apartments are rent controlled, which means that as a landlord, you cannot just charge anything you want. You have to stay within the prices that are decided by the city of Paris. And as you know, that's just not the case on Airbnb. You can pretty much charge anything you want. So now let me give you an example. All right, so let's take this cute Airbnb that's right by the Louvre, and it's like really cute place. Like I would 100% stay there and be happy with it. It has a ton of great reviews, and I see here that it's 18 square meters, which is, by the way, 194 square feet. Now let's compare the prices of renting it short term to long term. So this is an official website by the city of Paris to know how much you should charge, and this depends mostly on location and on size. So this tiny studio is somewhere around here, and after entering a bit of info, I get this rent price. Do the math, you should be renting it long term for a grand total of 662 euros, which is $785. Now, if you want to have a good laugh, let's see the price of the Airbnb per week. Oh my god, oh my god. Yep. 7 nights. Oh my God. I have no words. I was expecting something high, but not that high. It is 1,150 euros a week. That is $1,360 a week. That's almost 7 times as much as renting it long term. You know, it's very clear what's in it for landlords. And given all this map with all the Airbnb listings will not surprise you. Whenever people have a tiny apartment that's located in a touristy area, it is more profitable to rent it on Airbnb. But you know, the issue is that in the meantime, local Parisians are having troubles finding an apartment. Paris has lost 20,000 homes that are turned into short-term rentals, according to Ian Bossa, the deputy mayor in charge of housing in Paris. And I've seen firsthand how hard it is to find a place to rent in Paris. 2 years ago, when we moved back to Paris in this apartment, it was around a year before the Olympics, and every time we were visiting a place, a lot of landlords didn't want to sign a long-term contract because they wanted to get the place back and put it on Airbnb during the Olympics. I have to say that it was so annoying that we started most of our messages to the landlords asking about the type of contract they would be renting the apartment with, which if you're looking for a place in France is called bail loi allure. And by the way, if you're having the same issue, you're welcome to copy my message, which I'll put on screen right now. And it's not just me, a lot of people are struggling to find an apartment in Paris. Short-term rentals are maybe the most visible reason, but it's a very complicated topic and there's many others. And one thing you need if you're traveling to France is today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. With Surfshark VPN, you can switch your virtual location and access over 4,200 servers in 140 locations to get access to content that's usually blocked in your country. For example, since the Chicago Bears finally had a good season this year, we were on the edge of our seats watching all the games and the recaps. And since we're in France, but also travel a lot, it's really hard to do that without a good VPN because a lot of the content is blocked if you're not in the US. And with Surfshark VPN, I can change my virtual location to the US in just one click. And by the way, this also works with TV shows and movies on the most popular streaming platforms because different countries have different shows available. Also, if you're traveling, using a VPN is a great hack for shopping online since a lot of websites are showing you different prices based on your location. And Surfshark is not just great for entertainment, it also keeps you safe online. A VPN encrypts all of your data sent between your device and the internet, which makes it safer to access public Wi-Fi when you're traveling. So if you want to try it, go to surfshark.com/Lucille or use code Lucille at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. And it's not just a problem for locals. Short-term rentals can make your experience worse as a visitor as well. So we're all in the same boat here. And I want to be clear with you, I've stayed at many Airbnbs and I've really enjoyed them. Like, especially when it's managed by a host that truly makes you feel that you're a guest in their home. But we can all agree that sometimes some Airbnbs feel a bit impersonal. So we've all been there. We booked an Airbnb in an expensive city because it was cheaper. And maybe we arrive late at night and we have to be kind of on a treasure hunt to find the key in a lockbox that looks like this and is often hidden. Then when you arrive, the place is really poorly furnished with that exact type of generic decor. You often have an unusable kitchen with only 1 fork for 4 people. Things don't work as they should. The coffee is really weak and there's only 1 roll of toilet paper for your whole stay. And of course, when you check out, there's so many rules to follow, like strip the bed, take the trash out. So here, this type of Airbnbs are the worst of both worlds. You don't have the personal touch of staying in an actual bed and breakfast, and you don't have the professionalism of staying at a hotel. And by the way, staying in a short-term rental is not always cheaper than staying at a hotel. I've kind of found conflicting info on whether Airbnbs or hotels are cheaper, and from my personal experience, I have to say that it depends on where you're going and the time of the year, so I always compare the two. And I'll let you share your thoughts on the topics in the comments, but in any case, if you're booking an Airbnb, you should be on the lookout for hidden fees. There's of course the ones you can find on the platform, but then there's secret ones that you can find on the ad. Like, I've already been charged extra for sheets and towels, which is kind of, you know, the whole point of why I'm staying in an Airbnb. I want to sleep on a bed and wash myself. And apparently it's a pretty common occurrence. And here in this video, we're not getting into the short-term rental hell stories. There's a full website dedicated to it, aptly named airbnbhell.com. And you can also find a lot of crazy stories online, like these people that got their stuff stolen, or these ladies who arrived in the middle of the night to find a crazy scary building that was under intense construction and a key that didn't work. And the reason for these problems is very simple. Short-term rentals are not hotels and were never meant to be. So you know how when you stay in a hotel, you kind of get the same standardized experience? There's someone to welcome you at the front desk and give you your key. There's a professional housekeeping service. You can call someone if something goes wrong. And yes, I have to say it feels a bit generic, but that's kind of the point. You know what to expect. Also, hotels are built or renovated to be hotels. The whole infrastructure of the building exists for the sole purpose of hosting strangers. For example, there's stuff like reinforced plumbing, sturdy furniture, soundproofing, emergency exits, and hotel-grade sheets that have to be washed at a high temperature. And unlike Airbnbs, hotels have to follow strict rules around cleaning, fire safety, and accessibility. And a normal apartment building is very different. It was not designed for the constant coming and going of people. It was designed to be someone's home. And apartments in Paris are very beautiful but very old. So we have thin walls, we have a lot of quirks, and that's why there's some unwritten rules that Parisians follow to make life more comfortable for everyone. And if you're a tourist, you don't know about them, and it's not your fault. I didn't know about them either the first time I stayed in a short-term rental in Paris. So the year is like 2011. I just turned 18 and I'm doing a summer internship in Paris, and it's my first time staying alone in a short-term rental. And obviously I invite one of my childhood friends to join me for the weekend, and since we're two college girls alone on a weekend in the 2010s, we just go out and party. And when we come back to the apartment, we obviously debrief the night, and it's like 4 a.m. and at some point the doorbell rings and it's the downstairs neighbor. And right away I feel so bad because I noticed she has been crying, and she tells me that she can literally hear every footstep and everything that's going above her. And on my side, that was the first time ever I stayed in a Paris apartment on my own, so I didn't know the walls were so thin because I grew up in an individual home back in Toulouse. And we spoke for a while, and I still remember her today because she told us that she was thinking of moving out because every time a new short-term rental guest arrived, it was the exact same thing. And since I was 18 and honestly a bit dumb, I was not even thinking that I was bothering people. But this lady gave me a crash course on how to be a good neighbor in Paris, which is mainly keep your voice down and take your shoes off. And I still apply those tips to these days, and I try not to bother my neighbors. And from that experience, I understand why more and more buildings are banning short-term rentals, because the problem is not the visitors, it's that you're turning an apartment into a hotel room without changing anything around the building or doing any kind of renovation to make the place suitable for guests. Like, you're not doing anything about the thin walls or the creaky floors. And the neighbors, they still need to wake up and go to work in the morning. So they don't want to hear people dragging their suitcases in front of their door at 2 a.m. or, two 18-year-old girls debriefing their party. And quick side note, if you want the best of both worlds, you should check out serviced apartments. They are exactly like hotels with similar rules, but they have apartment amenities like kitchen and a dinner table. So here I really hope you understand that I'm not saying that you shouldn't stay in short-term rentals. I just think you deserve to stay in a place that has been made for visitors and that's comfortable, nice, and most importantly, legal. Because remember, as I was telling you, around a quarter of Airbnbs in Paris are illegal. So let's see why and what you can do to avoid ending up on airbnbhell.com. So you're now very aware that in Paris, short-term rentals are a problem. And that's just like in other big European cities like Barcelona or Amsterdam. So like a lot of other European cities that also have a problem with short-term rentals, Paris is starting to fight back. And in 2024, there was an anti-Airbnb law that has been worrying visitors. So now you can only rent your primary residence for 90 days, or you have to do what's called a change of status, which means you have to become a professional Airbnb with different laws. Then in any case, you need to register your ad with the city of Paris. So this is often why you see a registration number at the bottom of some Airbnb ads. There's no way to check it yet, but I'd recommend staying only in Airbnbs with that number. And then there's also other things that are a bit harder to check, like your Airbnb should have good insulation, which It's not always the case, especially if you're on the last floor, and they're also cutting some tax breaks. I personally feel that the objective of this crackdown is to guarantee better quality legal rentals for visitors. Like either you're staying in people's home, you know, like the people who are staying at my place back in the day, or you're staying in a professional short-term rental that's well managed. I think that would be the ideal situation, but obviously not everyone is complying with this law, and the city of Paris is kind of on a hunt for illegal Airbnbs, and fines for an illegal Airbnb can go up to 50,000 euros. euros. I have to say that as a visitor, there's no sure way to see if an Airbnb is legal or illegal, but one thing you can do is to try to avoid staying in short-term rentals in places that are impacted by over-tourism, you know, like the Latin Quarter or Montmartre. If you have to stay there, I'd recommend staying in a very legit-looking hotel instead. So yes, you can see the city of Paris is doing its best, but it's not really enough. So as a visitor, you should do your own research because that will help you avoid bad surprises or cancellations. So a few tips are to check reviews, check registration numbers, look at the photos really well, and apply the tips in this video to be a good neighbor. As I always say, when you're traveling, it's important to remember that you're a guest in someone's country. So try to behave like one and everything will be alright. Remember that Paris is our home and that while Paris is one of the top destinations, tourism only represents 9% of jobs in the Paris region, and that over-tourism can be an issue. Like there's some parts of the city where locals actually don't go because they've been impacted by the wrong approach to tourism. I think that if you're on the channel, you're exactly the type of people we love having here in Paris. So please keep being nice and culturally open and send this video to someone who might need it. And if you want to know more about the French culture and travel to Paris like a local, I've made these videos for you and I think you should check them out. Bye for now.